Hi everyone, welcome to the movie seat booking app project. In this video, we'll be building a practical and fun UI that you often see on movie theater websites where you can select seats and choose a movie. In this app, each movie comes with a different ticket price. You'll also see a simple legend showing seat statuses: blue for selected seats, white for occupied, and gray for available ones. You can select multiple seats, but you can't pick the occupied ones. Once selected, the app calculates the total cost based on the number of seats and the price of the movie. For example, if each seat costs $10 and you select 4, the total will be $40. If you change the movie to one with a higher price, say $12, the total will update accordingly. We'll also add a great feature: local storage. This will save your seat selection, the chosen movie, and the total price. So even when you refresh or leave the page, your data will still be there. We'll be working with JavaScript techniques like for each, map, and the spread operator to make everything run smoothly. By the end of this project, you'll have a fully functional seat booking app that feels just like the real thing. So let's dive in and get started. If you like what we are doing, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, leave a comment if you have any questions or ideas, and check the description below for the source code. Alright, let's get started.
Alright, so we're going to start on the HTML for the movie seat booking app. So I just have an index HTML, a script.js, and a style CSS, which are all empty. So let's start with the index HTML. I'm just going to create a boilerplate with Emmet by doing !enter, and we'll tab down to the title here and change it to movie seat booking. And then we just want to link in our style sheet. And let's link in our script. So script : source enter will create a script tag with a source attribute. And we want to link in script.js. Okay, and then in the body here, we're going to create a div with the class of movie container. And this is going to be the select box for the movie. Okay, we're also going to have a label. We don't actually need a for attribute, so we're just going to say pick a movie. And then we're going to have a select. And the select is going to have an ID of movie so that we can grab onto it in the JavaScript. We don't need a name attribute. And in the select, we're going to have an option here. Actually, we're going to have 4 options. So we'll do times for enter using Emmet. And the value is going to be the price of the movie. So we have 10, we have 12, 8, and 9. And then in the actual tag here, we're going to put the movie name. Let's say Avengers Endgame. Of course, you can change the name if you want to the movies. And then I'm just going to put the price in here as well. So this is a $10 ticket, and then this is going to be Joker, and this is a $12 ticket. We have Toy Story 4, which is $8. And then finally we have The Lion King, which is $9. $9. Okay. So that's it for the movie container. Now we're going to go underneath and create the showcase, which is basically like a legend. It's going to show the color seats for seats that are open, for selected seats, and occupied seats. And this is going to be an unordered list with an ID, or I'm sorry, a class of showcase. And we'll have list items in here, and in each list item we'll have a div with the class of seat, and underneath we'll have a small tag that's going to have the description. This is just going to say NA, meaning that the seat is open. Okay, and then what I'll do is copy this down. We need 3 of these. This next one is going to be for selected seats, so we want to add a class of selected. And then for the caption here or whatever, we'll say selected. And then this one is going to be for occupied. So we're going to give it a class of occupied. And in the description here, we'll say occupied. Okay, so that's going to be the showcase. So underneath that, we're going to have basically the rows of seats and the little movie screen. These are going to be wrapped in a container. And we'll have the class for the screen, nothing inside of it. It's just going to be styled with CSS, just like the seats themselves. Now we need to have some rows, so we're going to create a class of row, and inside here we're going to have 8 divs with the class of seat. So we'll say times 8 enter, which will give us 8 divs with the class of seat. And we need 6 rows, so I'm going to just copy this down. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now some of these seats I want them to be occupied already, so I'm going to go, you can put occupied on any of these seats, but if you want to do exactly what I'm doing, I'm going to start in the second row here and go to the 4th seat and add the class of occupied, and I'll just go ahead and grab this, and let's do this next one as well. So we have 2 seats in that row that are occupied. In the next row, let's do the last 2, and then we'll skip the next row, and then in this row here, let's do again the 4th and 5th, and then in the last one, we're going to do 1 up from the top and the 2 above that. Okay, so now we have our rows. The last thing we need is our paragraph with the text. So this is going to have a class of text, and this basically will just say, you have selected however many seats with a total of whatever the price. So let's say you have selected, and then we need a span here, and I'm going to give it an ID of count because we need to insert this. This is going to be dynamic, but we'll start off with 0. So we'll say you have selected 0 seats, and we'll say for a price of, and then we need another span. We're going to give this an ID of total, and we'll put 0 here as a default, and let's also put a money sign right before the span, so right here. Alright, so we should be good. Let's go ahead and open this up. I'm going to use live server, so open with live server, and that's what it's going to look like. So it doesn't look too good because we need to add our CSS, and I'm just going to make it so we can see both at the same time here. Alright, so we have our markup done. In the next video, we're going to start to style this. Okay, so we have our markup done, which is pretty simple. So now we're going to style this. So let's close up index.html and open up style CSS. And I'm going to be using a font. So I'm just going to go ahead and open up a new browser here. We're going to go to fonts.google.com, and we're going to use the Lato font, L-A-T-O. So we can just click this plus sign and just grab, we can either use the link in the HTML or the import in the CSS, which is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to copy that, and we can close that up and just paste that in. Okay, and you can do Command B if you want to close the sidebar here to give you some more room, but I think we'll be fine. So I'm going to add a reset, taking away any, basically I don't want to have any added width if we use padding on anything, so I always use this box sizing property and set it to border box. We'll be doing that in just about every UI that we build. And then let's say body, give it a background color. We're going to give it a background color of hexadecimal 242333, and we're going to display flex. We'll be doing this in quite a few projects as well, because basically what I want is just to center everything horizontally and vertically, and this is one of the easiest ways to do it, is to use flexbox. Now if I just display flex, you can see that it automatically aligns the flex items horizontally, which I don't want, so I'm going to change the flex direction from the row, which is the default, to a column. So now it's backwards. And let's make the color of the text white so you can actually see it. Okay, and then we're going to align items to the center. Okay, so it's centered horizontally. I also want it centered vertically, so we have to do 2 things: justify content center, and then add a min height. Actually, we can just use height of 100 viewport heights, meaning it takes up the whole viewport. Okay, so I save that. Now everything is centered right in the middle. And then let's apply our font family, which is going to be Lato. Okay, and then let's just take away any margin. Okay, so that should be it for the body. Now we're going to start on the movie container here, which is the select. On the actual movie container class, I just want to set a margin movie container, we're going to do margin 20 pixels top and bottom, 0 left and right. And then we want to do the select, so movie container and then the select list. Okay, and we're going to set the background color white and remove any border. We want this to look the same on all operating systems and in all browsers. So let's set a border radius of 5 pixels. Let's set a font size. Let's do font size of 14. And let's do a margin left to bring it away from the pick a movie text. We'll do 10 pixels margin left. And then let's add some padding. So 5 pixels, 15 pixels, 5 pixels, and 15. So top right, bottom left. And then if I save this, notice the padding isn't showing up. It might show up on a Windows machine. Select lists, they look different depending on the operating system you're on. So what I'm going to do is set the appearance to none. And we have to add the prefixed version as well. So MOZ-appearance. None. And then we also want WebKit appearance. Set that to none as well. And now when I save, now we can see the padding is in effect. Okay, so that's good. Let's move on to... let's do the seats. We have a ton of seat classes here, and obviously there's nothing showing because there's no content in the div. It's just a class of seat that we have to style. So let's grab the seat class. So for the seat, we're going to have a default background color, and that's going to be like a grayish color. It's going to be 4, 4, 4, 4, 5, 1. Okay, and if I save, we're still not going to see the seats because there's no content. There's also no height or width. So let's set a height so that we can actually see this. We'll set a height of 12 pixels, and let's set a width of 15 pixels. If I save, now we just have a bunch of these squares. Let's separate them a bit. So we'll do a margin on each one of 3 pixels. Okay. And these, basically, this is the showcase with its seats, and then these are the rows, which we want to go this way, but we'll fix that in a minute. Let's add a rounded top to each seat, so we want to do a border. Let's do border radius. Actually, it's border top left radius, and we're going to do 10 pixels, and we're going to copy that down and do border bottom. Border top right, because we want both of the top corners to be round. Okay, so now they look more like seats. So let's get this row settled. So remember, we have 6 divs with the class of row, and in each one of those we have 8 seats. So all I want to do with the row class is align them horizontally. We can do that by simply saying display flex. Okay, so now all the rows with the 8 seats are the flex items, and those are going to be aligned horizontally. Okay, let's handle the colors of the seats, because selected and occupied are going to have a separate color. So we'll go ahead and say, actually we'll go up here and say seat.selected. So any seat class that also has the class of selected, we're going to set the background color. And we want to set that to the hexadecimal value of 6FEAF6, which is that bluish, greenish color. So if I save, right now we only have one seat that's selected, and that's in the showcase. Later on, we're going to be able to click on these and then change the class to selected, and they'll light up green or blue, whatever color it is. Now for the occupied, say seat.occupied. We want these to have a background color of white. We should have a few of them because we have the showcase, and then we also, remember, we added the class of occupied to a couple seats in the row. So the next thing I want to do is add a space, kind of like a real movie theater, how you have the rows on the sides. So right here I want to put a margin. So I basically want to select the second one in. So I can use the CSS pseudo selector to do that. I can say seat, and we're going to use nth of type, and we want the second one in. And we're going to add a margin on the left of 18 pixels. I'm sorry, we want to do seat and type. What did I do wrong here? Oh, I did margin left. I need to do margin right. Because right now what I did is I took this row right here, or this seat, and added a margin left. We want it to be on the other side. So if we do margin right, then we have the space on that side. Now over here, we want to choose this one and put a margin left. So I'll copy this, but instead of doing nth of type, we're going to do nth last of type. 2, and we're going to do margin left. So if I do that, now we have a row on this side. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is add a little hover effect on the seats that aren't taken. So I want, first of all, the cursor should be a pointer, and then I also want it to scale up a little bit. So to select this, we're going to say seat, and then we're going to use the not pseudo selector, and then the occupied class. So basically seats that are not occupied on the hover state. We're going to change the cursor to a pointer, and we're going to use the transform property to scale it, and we're going to scale it to 1.2. 1 is the default, so we're just going to scale it up just a little bit. So now when I hover, you can see we get the mouse pointer and it scales up. Now one thing up here, it does it as well, and I don't want that. I don't want it to happen in the showcase. So what we'll do is just grab this and copy it down, and let's add .showcase. So if it's in the showcase, then we want the cursor to be default, and we want the scale to be the default one. So now that doesn't happen in the showcase, it just happens down here and only on seats that aren't occupied. Okay, so now let's deal with this, the showcase area. So say showcase. So the first thing we want to do here is, let's add a background color. We're just going to make kind of like a transparent background with RGBA, which is red, green, blue, alpha. So we'll do all zeros, which will be black, and then a transparency of 0.1. So now you can see we have a very faint background. Alright, and then let's add padding here. We'll do 5 pixels top and bottom, 10 left and right. And let's add a border radius of 5 pixels. And then we're going to set the color of the text darker, so 777. And we want to get rid of the bullet points, so we're going to do list style type none. And we want these to be horizontal, so we're going to display flex, which will put them in a row. And then let's do a justify content, and any remaining space we'll put between the elements, so space between. And yeah, I think that should be good for the showcase itself. Now we want to do the showcase list items. Okay, so showcase list items, I'm also going to display flex. Remember, the list items are the seat and the caption. So now those are horizontal. And we want to just align items center and justify content center, and set a margin of 0 and 10 pixels. Okay, and then the small tag, which is the text here, I'm just going to move it slightly to, or move the margin left to push the seat slightly over. So showcase, list item small, and we're just going to add a margin left of 2 pixels. Push that over just a little. Okay, so that looks pretty good. We want to add the screen now. There's actually going to be a movie screen here. We have the class, if you remember, right here. Wait, where is it? There is the screen. It's right here within the container under the showcase and above the movie. And we can't see anything because there's no content in it. So let's add screen. style the screen. And we're going to set the background color to white. Okay, we're not going to be able to see it because again there's no content and there's no height or width. So let's set the height. Let's do 70 pixels for the height. Spell height correctly. Height and then width. We're going to do 100% so it takes up the whole width of its container. Okay, let's add a margin of 15 pixels on the top and bottom. And then let's add, we're actually going to add a transform property. And we can use this rotate X. Rotate X, and we'll rotate it, let's say negative 45 degrees, and that's going to make it thinner. And then let's also add a box shadow. So for the box shadow, we're going to do 0, 3 pixels, 10 pixels, RGBA. And let's do white, so it's going to be 255 for red, green, and blue. And then an opacity, or an alpha value of 0.7. So now it has that kind of blur effect around the edges. Alright, let's see. We also have a property that I want to use on the container. We haven't done anything with the container yet, so I'm going to put that just right up here. And there's a property we can use called perspective, which I actually have never used before this project, and it has to do with kind of like 3D effects. And if we set perspective to a large amount of pixels, like 1,000 pixels, and we save, you can see that the screen is now tilted in. And you can kind of mess with it a little. If it can be 700, that changes it a little. I think 1,000 looks good. And then for the container, I'm also just going to have margin. Push the text down a little bit. Okay, and then the last thing I want to do here is for the text, I want the zeros right here, the total and the count to be a different color, that bluish color. So we'll say paragraph with the class of text. And actually it's a span that we want to style. And we're going to set the color to hexadecimal 6F, this right here, 6F EAF6. So now those zeros have that bluish color. Okay, so I think that's it. Let's just add a margin on the text as well. I want to do a 5 pixel top and bottom margin. 5 pixels, 0. There we go. Alright, so in the next video we're going to do the fun part, which is bring this to life with JavaScript. We want to be able to click on these seats here and make them selected. We also want to be able to update the number of seats that are selected and the amount that it's going to cost for the tickets for all the seats combined. Alright, so we'll do that in the next video. Alright guys, so we're going to get into the JavaScript here. First thing we want to do is select the elements from the DOM, from the document object model that we want to manipulate or add events to, whatever we want to do with them. First thing I'm going to grab is the container. Okay, we're going to need this. So it has a class of container. So what I'll do is create a variable called container. And we'll set this to document. So we have a document object. And this has a method called query select. And in here we can select anything we want from the DOM. We can select a paragraph or a UL or some ID with the hash, or a class. In this case, we're going to select the class of container. Okay, we also want to grab the seats. So we're going to say document dot. Now in this case we have multiple seat classes. So we're going to use query selector all instead of query selector. And we want to grab anything with the class of seat, and you can see there's just a bunch of them here. And the difference between these two selectors, query selector and query selector all, is that query selector all grabs all of them and puts them into what's called a node list, which is very similar to an array. You can actually run methods on it as if it were an array, where query selector will select just one. So there's only one container, so that we're using query selector. If there were multiple containers, it would just select the first one. Okay. Now, one thing I want to do here is I only want to select the available seats that are in the row here. Okay, remember these are all wrapped in a class of row. So let's add on to this dot row. So we're getting all the seats in the row. We want the ones that are not occupied. So we're going to actually add here, just like we did in our CSS, not, and then occupied. Okay, so that will grab all the seats in the rows that are not occupied. And then let's grab the count. So document, and we'll use get element by ID because we used an ID for the count. And what I'm talking about is this right here, this span, the ID of count, because we're going to need to change that. Let's also grab the total. So this was an ID of total, and we'll call this total. And then the select list. So let's say const movie select. Set that to document dot get element ID, and that has an ID of movie. Okay. Now we also want the initial selected ticket price from the select list, because this will give us the actual element, but we want the value inside of it. So I'm going to call this variable ticket price. And I'm going to set it to the movie select dot value, which will give me the actual value. Okay, if I go ahead and console log ticket price, and save, and I open up my console over here, you'll see we get 10. That's the initial ticket price, and it's not going to change, like it's not going to log it again if I select something different, because we don't have an event listener on here yet. Now, one thing I want to do is change this to a number from a string. If I use the type of operator here, which tells you the data type of a variable, you'll see it's a string. So there's a really easy way to turn this into a number, and that's just add a plus sign in front of it. You could also wrap it in like parse int function if you want, but I think that this is an easier way to do it, and now you can see that it actually logs number as the type. Okay, we don't need this, I just wanted to show you that. So we have everything selected that we need, so let's add our first event listener. So when we click on a movie here, not a movie, when we click on a seat, I want to change the class to selected because we want it to turn blue like this. Alright, now we have a ton of seats here, and there's a few ways we could handle this. One is we could take the seats, which remember is a node list, which is like an array, and we could loop through it. We could use like a for each, loop through it, and then add an event listener on each seat. But a better way to do this, a more performant way, is to grab the container and add the event listener onto that, and then when we run the event, which in this case would be a click, we want to make sure that it's a seat that we're clicking on, and then we'll add our functionality. So let's add an event listener onto the container, and it's going to be a click event. And this second parameter is going to be a function that takes in an event parameter. Okay, so we can do it this way, although I prefer to use arrow functions. So what I'm going to do is get rid of the word function and then just put an arrow here. Okay, you can do either way. I just prefer arrow functions. I think they look neater. And then from here, we want to first of all check. Well, actually, let's do a console log, and I just want to show you if we do e.target. What that gives us is the exact element that's clicked on. So if I go over here, anywhere within the container, and I click, you can see right there, it's logging the screen div. If I click in this space right here, it's just the container. If I click on this seat, it gives me the class of seat. If I click on this occupied seat, it gives me that div. So anywhere in the container I click, this is going to run, and it's going to show me the exact element I click on. So now we want to basically bring this down to only open seats. So let's create an if statement here, and we're going to say if e.target, so remember this is the element that's clicked on, and we want to check the class, the class list. So if we say class list and then dot contains, which is a method that will look in the class list So if it contains the class of seat, then let's run something in here. We'll just, again, log the e.target. So now if I click on the screen, nothing's happening. If I click in this blank space, nothing. If I click on a seat, it does run, okay, because it's making sure that whatever I click on has the class of seat. Now one problem here is if I click on the occupied, it still runs because it does have a class of seat. So what we want to do here is add, inside the if here, we're going to say, and if not, okay, exclamation is not, e.target dot class list dot contains, and then occupy. Okay, so what we're saying here is if it has the class of seat but does not have the class of occupied, then run this. So now if I click on one of these seats, it works, but if I click on the occupied one, nothing happens. Alright, so let's get rid of this console log, and we know that our click events are working on the available seats. So what do we want to do next? We want to add the selected class, right? We want it to turn blue. So we can simply take e.target, which is what we're clicking on, and we can add a class, or I should say toggle a class, by saying class list dot toggle. So we can do class list add, class list remove, and class list toggle. We want toggle because we want to be able to take it off as well, or I should say unselected. So let's toggle the class of selected. So we'll save that, and now if I click on a seat, you can see that it turns blue because it's now getting that selected class. We're toggling it, which we're adding it. If I click it again, it's going to come off it because, again, we're toggling. Okay, so that part of it's done. Now, the next part is to update the total. We want this to, this should now say 3 seats, and then we want to add the price as well. So we should be able to multiply the amount of seats by the ticket price, which we have set here. So this stuff I'm actually going to do in a separate function called update selected count. Okay, I'm going to put that function up here. What I usually like to do is keep my functions above my event listeners. So let's say function update selected count. Put a comment here. We'll just say update total count. And inside here, we're going to first of all get the selected seats. So let's say const selected seats. And we're going to use here document dot query selector all. And we want to select all of the selected seats. So we'll say dot row because we're only dealing with seats in the rows. And then the class of seat that also have the class of selected. So that'll give us all the selected seats, and we can go ahead and console log that. Seats. You know what? Let's close the sidebar here. So now if I click on one of these, you can see what we get. We get a node list. Now I have 3 seats selected, so it's showing me I have a node list, and we have 3 elements inside of this node list, and they're just all the divs with the class div seat selected. Okay, and if I deselect that, now we have 2, now we have 1, now we have an empty node list. So that will put all of our selected seats into a node list called selected seats. And what we want to do next is get the length of the node list. So we can say const, and let's say selected seats count, and we'll just set that to selected seats dot length. Okay, length is a property that will get the number of elements in an array, or in this case in a node list. So if we console log selected seats count, when I click one of these, we see 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Okay, so now down here, actually let's get rid of this. Now we want to take the count element that we selected from the DOM, and we want to set the inner text. So there's a property called inner text, because we want to change this right here, the 0, and we're going to set it to whatever that selected seats count is. And then for the total, we're going to take the inner text and we're going to set it to the selected seats count, and we just want to multiply that by the ticket price, and that should give us the correct price. So we'll save that, and now if I go over here and I select the seat, you can see that this is now changed. It says you have selected 1 seat for a price of $10. Select another one, 2 seats for the price of $20. Another one, 3 for $30. Okay, so what's happening, just to kind of reiterate, we add an event listener onto the container, which is this whole area here, and then we're checking to see if what we clicked on has a class of seat, but not a class of occupy. If so, then we're going to add a class of selected, which makes it blue. Then we call update selected count, which is going to grab all of the selected seats, okay, only the ones that are selected. We're going to get the length, put it into this variable, and then we're going to set the inner text of the count element, which is this right here, to whatever the count is, and the total, which is this right here, to the count times the ticket price. Okay? Now, we also want to make it so if we change the movie, like if we select Joker, we want the price to update, right? Because right now, this isn't true. I mean, it shouldn't be $30 because this is a $12 ticket. So let's add another event listener. I'm just going to add a comment here. This is, let's say seat click event, and then we'll add our movie select event. So for this, we're going to take our movie select element, which is the select list, and we're going to add an event listener. Now, we don't want a click event. Since this is a select list, there's a change event that fires off when you change the And then we can run this, and it just loops through, and we can log whatever we want. you'll see it'll replace those, and if I reload, they stay in local storage. All right, so before we move on to the next video, through here. First of all, we want to check to see if there are any seats in local storage. Then we want to loop through and see basically the ones that are there. We want to add the selected class to in the UI. Okay, so 2, 3, 4 would be, so this is the 2 index, 3, 4. So these 3 should then have the class of selected. So there's a couple things we need to do. First, we're going to check to see if anything is in the selected seats. So let's say if selected seats is not equal to null. This is how we can check to see if something is in local storage. Let's also make sure that it's not an empty array. So we'll say and if selected seats dot length, which is the length of the array, is greater than 0. Okay, if that's true, then we're going to take our seats. Okay, remember seats is actually this right here. We're going to loop through all of the seats. So let's say seats dot for each. Okay, we're going to loop through these, and I'm going to pass in some parentheses here because not only are we going to need the seat parameter or argument, we're going to use the index as well. Okay, this is a function. So now we want to check to see if selected seats, and we're going to use index of again. So we're checking to see if it's in the index. And this is where index comes in. That's why we passed it in here. Okay, now this we need to check to see if index of is greater than -1. Because remember when I showed you in the last video, was it the last video? No, the video before that, if it's not in there, okay, if we're checking for something in an array using index of and it's not there, it gives us -1. So if it's greater than -1, that means it is there. Okay, and if it is there, then we're going to take seat and we're going to add a class onto it with class list.add. And the class we want to add, of course, is selected. So now if I save this, there you go. So now the seats that are in the index are now lit. They're now colored blue. Okay, if I go ahead and select some more here and I reload, you can see that they're still there. Okay, because they're in local storage. If I deselect them, reload, these are still there. Now, you might notice that the price and the number of seats still say 0 when I reload. That's because we haven't implemented that yet. So let's go ahead and do that. So underneath this if statement here where we did the selected seat stuff, we're going to set a variable called selected movie index, and we're going to set that equal to local storage dot get item, and here we want to get the item of selected movie index. Okay, and then we just want to check to make sure that's not null, so we'll say if selected movie index is not equal to null, meaning if it's in local storage, then we're going to take our movie select element and set the selected index to whatever that selected movie index is. Okay, remember down here we fetched the selected index. Here we're setting it. Okay, so we're going to set it to whatever the movie is in the local storage. So let's go ahead and save that. Just spelled local storage wrong. Here. Alright, so we'll save that. And you can see Toy Story 4 is selected. If I select Joker and I reload, it's still selected. Now, one thing you might notice is if I select Lion King, for instance, this is correct, 3 seats for 27, but if I reload, it goes back to 0, and that's because this happens when the update function is called, which is, where is it? Right here. This updated selected count, this is where that stuff gets updated. So all we have to do is call this on page load. So down here, at the very bottom, let's say initial count and total set, and we'll call update selected count. And there we go. So now it's getting called right away and it shows us the correct number. So I can go ahead and select some other stuff here. 6 seats for 54. If I change the movie, now it's 60, so that's correct. If I reload, everything's the exact same. Alright, so we were able to save everything to local storage, and then we have this populate UI that gets called right here and is defined right here, where we pull out all the selected seats, we loop through them, make sure that the correct ones are in the index, and then we add the class of selected to those ones in the index. And then we take the movie index, which is the select list here, and we set that to display the movie that's in local storage. And then down here we're just updating the selected count. I probably should have called this update selected count and total, because that's what it does really, is it updates both the count and the total, but that's fine, I guess they correspond to each other. So that's it. Hopefully you enjoyed this little project, and I'll see you in the next one.